say that it was for these unfair terms that Britain followed the appeasement policy? Tell me, Hitler, how did this all start?
I had a series of successful events related to my main aims for Germany. Rearmament, remilitarization of the Rhineland, the Saarland, and finally Anschluss were some of the events that boosted my confidence. I was ready to take the next step. Mr. Chamberlain might be the correct person to explain a bit more about this policy he followed.
So tell us, Mr. Chamberlain, why did you decide to follow this policy?
Well, sir, at the time, many nations had many worries about their local problems, and communism was one that all of the nations shared. Hitler is clearly standing up this, so it is one reason why I followed such policy. Britain and France also want to avoid any future war, as many people are still scared with the horrors of the First World War, and don't want this to happen again. Many people also, through that Treaty of Versailles is unfair, and that the USA won't support us if we send up Hitler. Therefore, we had no other choice than to appease.
I understand. And this policy came into effect when the events in the Sudetenland occurred in 1938, right? Edward Benz, leader of Czechoslovakia, was worried about Anschluss, although he had an agreement with Britain and France to protect Czechoslovakia if Hitler invaded. You had also made it clear that you had no plans for the Czechs, but Edward Benz was still terrified by Anschluss.
Yes, because we need to understand that this new state includes a large number of Germans from the Austro-Hungary Empire in the Sudetenland. Henlein, my main Nazi leader, stirred up trouble amongst the Sudetenland Germans and actually demanded to be part of Germany. I even stated in May that I intended to fight Czechoslovakia if necessary. So later on, I decided that Czechoslovakia should join Germany.
There you go, Herr Hitler, making things very clear as always. I think next is when you come in, right, Mr. Chamberlain?
Yes, there was a great concern amongst Europeans about another war. So on the 15th of September, I flew all the way to Munich to have a meeting and talk about this and other important subjects with Hitler in his house.
We all remember that, Mr. Chamberlain. Peace before our time and that famous broadcast. So what was your agreement on the situations with Czechoslovakia?
Well, we agreed on giving Hitler parts of the Sudetenland, and on the 19th of September we presented such plans to the Czechs. But I should have guessed Hitler's demands would get more demanding.
What happened, Herr Hitler?
Eventually, the Czech government was mistreating the Germans in the Sudetenland, so all I wanted was to rescue them, and this happened on the 1st of October. Then, Britain, France, Italy, and us met and agreed that the Sudetenland shall be given entirely to us.
When did this happen, gentlemen?
On September 29th, in the Munich Agreement. Excuse me. This is starting to get really annoying. Please excuse me for 1 second. Unfinished business. I'll get things straight in London now.
Herr Hitler, quickly, I have some questions for you. What happened after you were given the Sudetenland?
In 1939, Czechoslovakia was in chaos. So in March, I sent Germany troops to take over the rest of the country, and therefore increasing Lebensraum. This was my plan.
What was your plan?
To take over Czechoslovakia as I did. The Czechs didn't resist, neither Britain nor France. Everything was planned. All the way. That was my main aim. More Lebensraum. I had to admit this angered Britain and France, and therefore ended appeasement by starting their support to Poland, and if Hitler invaded it, they would declare war on us, as they think it is my next target, but they might do this just to frighten me.
Now that appeasement is over and you don't have the consent to keep on taking risks, hoping for the other European powers not to take action, what are your future plans? Are you going to still look forward into Lebensraum to the east, into Russian territories, and risk going into the Polish corridor?
Well, if it is of great interest of yours, this piece of land would also benefit from uniting from Germany. But there were some negotiations we discussed with the Russian leader, Stalin.
That doesn't answer my question, if you excuse me. Tell us more about this pact, then. What is it about? And more importantly, what are your aims to be accomplished with it?
I'd rather have Stalin explaining this to you, so I'm sorry, I'll be back in a moment.
Well, it seems that Hitler had a bit of a breakdown. Welcome then, Stalin. Now tell us a bit more what happened behind this agreement.
You might first wish to know that it was quite a difficult decision. Europe was going through some serious trouble. and I could clearly envision that would happen next. So I needed to support Britain and France. Hitler had already imprisoned and killed communists in Germany, and I was afraid of this to extend to our country. I then reached to Britain, but no agreement was reached early. I didn't know what to do, and the only way out seemed to be join the League of Nations in 1934, and I did so. I had the hope that Russia would obtain security, but I was completely wrong. The League was powerless, and it was evident as soon as Mussolini took over Abyssinia, and how both him and Hitler intervened in the Spanish Civil War.
So the lack of enforcement of the rules by the behalf of the League led to you leaving the League, right? We know that the League failed on disarmament, and even some British accepted Germany's rearmament and welcomed the much stronger Germany that was rising, as they hoped Germany would fight communism, which they saw as a bigger threat to the British. Even the treaty you signed with France in 1935 to help the USSR if Germany invaded didn't convince you, as they failed to take action when Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland, which was right on their own border.
That's correct, and the Munich Agreement in 1938 increased my fears. This either meant one of the two things, or rather both things. First, that France and Britain were powerless against Hitler, and second, they were happy of Hitler to take over Eastern Europe, probably including the USSR.
Still, you wish to negotiate with France and Britain about an alliance against Hitler, am I correct? You even had a meeting with them in March of this year, but Chamberlain refused to involve Britain in an agreement. Britain and France even guaranteed Poland to defend it if it was invaded, and it was done as a warning to Hitler. But apparently, it was like a support to one of the USSR's enemies.
And for these reasons, negotiations continued through the spring and summer of 1939. Suddenly, I received visits from Ribbentrop, the Nazis' foreign minister. This definitely showed me that Germany was more serious about the matter of making a treaty. These visits resulted in Nazi-Soviet pact in August 24th that both Hitler and I signed. The terms were announced to everyone, and now we agreed not to attack one another, and if you may want to know, to divide Poland between us.
Still, I don't quite understand why you agreed to a treaty with one potential enemy with whom you shared some kind of rivalry in the past. I do understand that Britain and France don't seem strong and reliable as allies against Hitler, and that you had designs on large sections of eastern Poland and wanted to take over the Baltic states, which had been part of Russia in the Tsar days. But do you really trust his words?
As a matter of fact, I don't. But I agreed on the treaty as a method to gain time and build up forces against any future attacks.
So you really think there's going to be some future attack, or even worse, war?
I think your interview is over, Stalin.
I think so. I need to go. I have to prepare some papers for later.
Well, I guess it's a pleasure to have you back again. But our time is almost over. We've still got one more question, though. Do you have any important message to Europe and the rest of the world?
Well, I just want to say that peace is going to be maintained throughout the world. Germany will keep looking forward into growing, but without recurring to war. Tomorrow, on September the 1st, it's going to be an important day, and we'll all remember that.
Well, audience, with this last word from Herr Hitler, we have now come to the end of this interview. But we'll see you next time on another edition of Euro News. Take care.